Hello and welcome to Plod with Me TV. My name is Colin and today we are going to take you around another bit of London and tell you about its history. We're going to do the second part of Fitzrovia and we're picking up pretty much where we finished off in the first bit. If I just show you, there we go. So we were down there looking at the place where Lauda Aquilano had lived, and that's where we finished because the mural had gone. So I'm going to pick up from there, and I'm just going to show you this building, and it says above the window on the first floor there, it says Hogarth Studios. Now this was a short-lived attempt by a group of artists to start one of those sort of artist societies, and it was basically in response to the Royal Academy not having much time for the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. So pre-Raphaelites was an artist style, different artists trying to do a new thing. Royal Academy didn't like it, and the people that started off this thing, I think it was about 1868, I think, only lasted, it was 1858 I think to 61, only lasted about 3 years, because basically they just didn't get the support. They were hoping there'd be more members would join them and would, it would become a movement in its own self, but because of the sort of opposition from the Academy, I suppose other people were a bit reticent about joining in with them. So there were a number of these artist sort of communities, people trying to do their own thing and sort of branch out, and they would sort of collect together and sort of try and promote their art. That was just one of the short-lived attempts. Now, there is a couple of things just up this way to tell you about. Now, that grey building, Wolf Gallery, in the mid-1960s, this was the headquarters for the Anti-Apartheid offices in London, and that's got a little story relating to it. And basically, one of the big gang leaders over here, criminal gangs, was a guy, the Richardsons, and one of them, Charlie Richardson, he apparently had some investments in, I think it was a gold mine in South Africa, or a diamond mine, one of the two. And the South African government basically said, well, if you don't want us to basically seize some of your investments and your that channel of money, we need something from you. So we want a list of all the names of the people in the Anti-Apartheid organization. So this took a very high-tech criminal sort of venture, needed all his knowledge and skill. I'm surprised there wasn't a movie about it, because basically what he did was he went and hid in the toilet, waited till everybody had gone home, jumped out, went down, rifled through the filing cabinet, sent the stuff off to South Africa. Job done. One of his easier ones, I would have thought. Now, while I was here, I think I mentioned in the last video, this is now sort of very sort of this is now all to do with media organizations, sort of small studios, TV organizations, magazines, that sort of thing. Well, here's one way to keep the people working. Hope you can see that. There's a big black Dalek, full size, just right in the lobby there. I have no idea why, but I'm sure it keeps the workers on their toes. Made me chuckle when I saw it. Right. Now, this one, you'll have to take my word for, because the building's long gone, courtesy of the Blitz. So, round about here was number 107, and it was here that at the turn of the 19th century into the 20th was the headquarters for the Russian Democratic and Socialist Labour Party. And no point in you looking at that. So basically, this was where Lenin and Trotsky persuaded all the others in the communist organization at the time. There was a bit of a congress held, and they persuaded them to go with their method of revolution. So essentially what Lenin and Trotsky, and Stalin even visited here as well, what they wanted to do was they wanted to have a hardcore group of communists and sort of, go hardcore at the revolution with just a small amount of people, whereas the opposition, they wanted to sort of build a broader membership base and try and foment revolution that way. But there was lots of argument and debating, because that's how they did it, and in the end, Lenin and Trotsky won the majority, and the majority were known as the Bolsheviks. The guys who lost out were known as the Mensheviks. They were the minority. So that's not took place here. That whole outlook of Karl Marx may have sort of, him and Engels may have put together the Communist Manifesto on the nature of communism, but how it came about in Russia, and I suppose elsewhere, was decided here. But as I say, the building's long gone courtesy of the Blitz, and so there's no plaques or anything else to sort of mark it's taking place. Now, let's take a wander further up. Now, there's not much else to tell you for a little while, so I'll do some music. I'm not sure what I'm in the mood for. A bit of classical maybe, a bit of jazz, we'll see. We are now in Fitzroy Street, which leads up to Fitzroy Square. Now, although there's no blue plaques here, I am aware of a bit of history for one of the buildings. So in this building, George Bernard Shaw lived here for a short period of time, for a few years. So a bit of history in that regard. George Bernard Shaw, famous Irish writer, wrote Pygmalion, which became My Fair Lady, and many other things. But famous Irish playwright. And then, in the 1950s, I believe it was, this was the first place, the first headquarters of L. Ron Hubbard's Scientology movement. So this is where it all started. I'm saying nothing, but this is where it started. Over on the right-hand side, there is an Indian YMCA, which has a restaurant throughout the week, and cafe. You know, you can go in and experience some Indian cuisine, and members of the public can go in. It's only open at specific times. You can check out at their set's website if you look up Indian YMCA in Fitzroy Street. But from what I've read, the food's quite good. Unfortunately, it's vegetarian, which just ain't me. And here we have Francisco de Miranda. Oh, very handy. I don't even have to remember the dates. Born 1750, died 1816 in a Spanish jail. It says, precursor of Latin American independence, born in Venezuela, died a prisoner in Spain. So basically, he had, I think he had actually worked for the Spanish. I know he fought in the French Revolution. I think it's sort of American Revolution, the various wars, including with the Spanish. And then he decided to try and go for independence for Venezuela. Very short-lived. He only lasted, I think it was about a year, 18 months, something like that. And then it all went wrong. And basically all the support for it fell away, and they ended up having to make a deal with the Spanish, for which one of his supporters, Simon Bolivar, never forgave him and actually sold him out to the Spanish, and that's how he ended up in Spanish jail and died. But then afterwards, Simon Bolivar did strike out for independence again and was more successful. But that's why his nickname was Precursor, because he was the first one to do it, even though it didn't last very long. That's he was basically the first one to strike out and give it a go. So Bolivar may have made more of a success of it, but it was him that had the guts to give it a go the first time round. So, and the reason why that's there is because he lived down there in Grafton Way. There are some flags hanging down. There's it's Venezuelan down on the left-hand side there. I don't know if you can see them, about halfway down. But that's where he lived for a period of time. No doubt gathering money and support for his bid for independence. So this is Fitzroy Square. Now, I suppose this is as good a time as any to tell you how it all got its name. So basically, to the north of here, up as far as Highgate, there was once a big manor called Totten Hall. And that was mentioned in the Domesday Book of 1086. And then there was even a big manor house at one stage called Tottenham Court, and from which we get Tottenham Court Road, which runs parallel with this. And that was then seized in the 1640s by the parliamentary forces during the English Civil War. So we had the Civil War, we had Oliver Cromwell, and then after he died, we had the king come back from France, King Charles II, and at that point this land was given to one of Charles II's illegitimate sons, and he was known as Henry Fitzroy, and he later became the Earl of Euston, which is why we've got Euston Station nearby. So basically that's how the whole area got its name, and then this square was developed, I think it was the late 1790s, although basically two sides of it were built first. Hold on, I'll show you them, hold on. Come on, do your thing. This is supposed to spin around. And for some reason, there we go. Right, so that side was built first, and the one behind me was built first. But this south side one that we're looking at now This is actually a reproduction because it was totally destroyed during the Blitz, and they basically rebuilt it to look the same as it had done. So it's actually quite modern, it's just designed old. But this right hand side here, this was built at the same time. And believe it or not, the other two sides were built about 25 to 30 years later, because what happened was, it was a late 1700s. You had lots of people building places, you know, developers raising money, building places, selling to the rich people. And then we had the French Revolution, and then the wars with France. And money was a bit scarce, and so you had two sides of it built, and it was about a further 25, 30 years before the rest of it got built. So it was designed by a guy called Robert Adams, but his brothers John and William finished the job off with the other two sides. So all this side is very heavily protected, you know, is listed. I suppose maybe because it was Robert Adams that designed it, and I think he carried a bit more weight than his brothers. And as you can see, very grand houses. And at the minute, I believe, you've got everything from a footballer to Griff Rhys-Jones living somewhere here. It says there, Sir Charles Eastlake, painter and first director of the National Gallery, lived here, which is fair enough. What I would be more interested in, if I was interested in art, is the fact that at number 8, next door, was apparently where James McNeill Whistler lived for a time. So I would have thought that carried a bit more weight than the first guy of the National Gallery, but that's just me. And A.W. Hoffman, Professor of Chemistry, lived here. But I'm more interested in the plaque at the end of the street, so I'm going to carry on up. So we're at the other end of Fitzroy Street. And the reason I wanted to come here was because, I'll just tilt up a bit, on that blue plaque it says Captain Matthew Flinders, 1774 to 1814, explorer and navigator, lived here. Now, although you might not know it, he is responsible for a name that is now in everyday use, and that is Australia. He was the person who mapped Australia, you know, sailed all around it, mapped the coastline, just, you know, spent a fair amount of time doing it. And then he made his way home. It was a bit of a torturous journey, you know, boats collapsing and all the rest of it. Ended up on his way back, he got captured by the French, spent some time in jail, several years. But during that time, because he was a captain and an officer, he was also given materials to amuse himself, and he started writing about his time mapping the place. And he became the first person to call it Australia. Not sure what the natives would have thought of that. Apparently before that it had been called by the Westerners Terra Australis, but he coined the term Australia, which eventually caught on. So that's his claim to fame. So, let's see. We're just going to have a wander around the square until, because we're going to basically circumnavigate and then make our way back down Cleveland Street. If I just come around here, we've got, may as well tell you about the post office tower, which is that one. This was the post office tower, built early 1960s. Took 2 or 3 years. At the time it was the tallest tower in London, and you used to be able to go up in it. Like, there's still people work there and stuff, but you used to be able to go up in it as a member of the public. I think there was a restaurant, but don't quote me. But unfortunately, 1971, some of my countrymen from the Irish Republican Army set off a bomb in the toilet of it, and ever since then it's been sort of private, you can't get in. But apparently there are tunnels underneath, there are places underneath, because it was thought that if the balloon ever went up, I suppose nuclear war-wise or whatever, there was places underneath where civil servants could go to work and try and keep the country running. Given how organised civil servants are at the best of the time, I would say that's dubious. But yeah, that was the idea, and apparently there was even access to Victoria Line, a tube station as well. Okay. Well, that one says Robert Gascoigne Cecil, 3rd Marquess of Salisbury, 1830 to 1903. He was a Prime Minister and he lived here. Now it's the Mozambique High Commission. And this one is Embassy of the Republic of Liberia. It's not bad having a little, little garden like that to go and sit in as and when. Come out of your palatial residence and then have that to sit in, have your coffee. So this is the other place that George Bernard Shaw lived in the area, number 29. It says George Bernard Shaw lived in this house from 1887 to 1898. From the coffers of his genius he enriched the world. Well, that's very, very modest. Underneath it says Virginia Stephen, otherwise known as Virginia Woolf, novelist and critic, lived here from 1907 to 1911. So she lived here with her brother. And again, it was a bit of a writer's circle, an intellectual circle. And by this time, by the early 1900s, this was seen as a bit less fashionable than Bloomsbury. But even with that, she was seen as like one of the queen bees of the Bloomsbury set, certainly the Fitzroy set round here. So they had sort of gone to Cambridge, and like I say, writers. Apparently Roger Fry, the artist, was one of them, one of the group. Keynes, the economist, was one of them, strangely enough. But they not only sort of tried to advance their artistic, creative side, but they also, as she said, they were couples who lived in squares and had triangular relationships. So they sort of kept up whatever sexual shenanigans they got up to as students. They carried it on once they moved down here, it would seem. So that's where she lived during the height of her sort of Bloomsbury bit. And as I say, although this was very fashionable initially after it was built and for part of the 1800s, Fitzrovia itself further down, as the rich people started to move away, a bit like Soho, the rich people moved away, and then what happened was it left space for like sort of workshops, there was sort of furniture makers and whatnot. A lot of flats, the houses were sublet, and that's where because they were cheaper, then the artists and the writers moved in. And then the artist suppliers would move in, and then like the models, and a bit of prostitution, a bit of everything. And it became a place, much like Soho, a lot of political agitators, hence the Russian Social Democratic Labour Club down the street. Lots of activity to do with people from other countries trying to get, trying to organise themselves so that they could go back to where they came from and start a revolution or start anew in their own country in a new way. So that's basically was the sort of potted history of how Fitzrovia sort of developed. But as I say, this is still very grand up here in my opinion. You might think it's not as grand as Bloomsbury, but I think it's okay. I'd settle for a little place here. Now, apparently, the movie maker Guy Ritchie lives on one of these as well. And he also owns the pub that we're coming down to on the left-hand side. I suppose I should show you this. Like I was saying, lots of artist groups, all that sort of stuff. And on this part, it says here, Roger Fry, 1866 to 1934, artist and art critic, ran the Amiga workshops here. So basically, again, setting up a new sort of artist venture. And this is where he ran that from. If I remember right, I think he sort of put into production, creating things. He used to get other artists and create sort of, it's almost like a mini version of a factory. So much so that some other artists got tired of it and moved off. So this is the pub owned by Guy Ritchie, the filmmaker. Apparently he wanted to create a very traditional English pub. You can, get yourself a nice meal and stuff inside. Does look nice. Must check out the meal prices online. Okay. So you can see it's all sort of modern here. Again, the Blitz redevelopment, hence the post office tower and various other things. And we are going to join Cleveland Street. Oh my word. No, I didn't know this. That's the first time I spotted this. Joseph Lister, pioneer of antiseptic surgery, lived here as a student. Now, if I remember right, he was the guy who was famous for doing really quick operations. And I'm nearly certain he was operating on someone, doing it at high speed. In the process, he cut one of the people assisting him, who later died of, the sepsis from the germs of the operation he was carrying out. It was a bit of a famous case, but I wasn't aware that he lived here. I must have been looking elsewhere the last time I was wandering about up here. So you can see up this end of Fitzrovia, sort of very modern buildings. You've got sort of London School of Economics buildings, you've got University College of London. No doubt there'll be flats, there will be offices, but it's very modern. And as I say, much of that will be due to wartime bombing. Oh, the wind's starting to pick up. As I said, it might get a bit stormy later today. next stop. So my gimbal was starting to dip there, so I just thought I'd spin it around and see if it would straighten up. So here we go again. So when I was last here, this was all covered in sort of building works. Well, it looks like they're virtually finished it. Okay, right. So this is the Cleveland Street, or was the Cleveland Street Workhouse, and it's been under redevelopment for the last few years. It got held up because of the bodies that were found underneath as they were, doing their work and digging stuff up. Because the workhouse had a sort of permission to bury the bodies of people that died on its land. So this was, like I say, a pauper's workhouse. Apparently it was originally designed for 200 people. Although at a later date it obviously must have expanded, because there was reports by one guy saying he never saw less than 500 all working in a laundry. And that was how it made its money. So basically, if you were in a workhouse, it was supposed to be because either you were infirm or old, and you would have not been paid for your work. Basically, the food, the grovel that they basically, the gruel rather, that they gave you, and the terrible bed space that you got was supposed to be payment enough. So you would have worked your behind off for very little in very terrible conditions, because either you were, as I say, infirm, old, or you were deemed to be idle, because if you were able-bodied and you weren't in a job, you were deemed to be idle, and you would get sent to a workhouse. Now, this one is obviously selling itself based on a nearby neighbour. So, it says quintessential luxury London living with a twist. And you can see they've got a big flourish with the twist, and I would say that is because just down the street, which we'll come to later, just down there on the left hand side, was where Charles Dickens lived for a while. And if he was looking for any source material for Oliver Twist, he wouldn't have had to go too far. So I would suspect that's why they've done that little flourish and added that word in there. So apparently it's going to be 25 new apartments. So this, after being a workhouse, it was then amalgamated into Middlesex Hospital, and then I think it was University College London Hospital or something like that until the 1990s, and now obviously it's just being sold off for private homes. So hopefully one of the local hospitals has got some decent money out of this. So I wonder how many social houses there'll be in it. I would suggest very few. Okay, across the street from it, is this pub, the King and Queen, which has a little bit of history attached to it. So when you go inside, there are portraits of various kings and queens of England. But there's one other portrait hanging among it, because it was here, 1962, a young American folk singer was working on a programme up at the BBC Studios up the top of the street there, and he came over to work on that, doing a small part as a folk singer, and apparently there wasn't much to the part. I think he was a bit bored, had a bit of spare time, and so he came down here, got his guitar and his harmonica out and got up and did a few songs, which apparently went down pretty well. And that was the first time that a young singer called Bob Dylan appeared outside of America and live. Don't know what happened to him. Word has it he did quite well for himself. But that's where it is, and now he's got his picture up there with the kings and queens of England. So that's the King and Queen. Alright, I'm just going to go down here because we've got the Samuel Augustine Courtauld Institute of Biochemistry written across there, and a big green plaque. I'm just curious to see what it says. Because again, I don't remember seeing it. Oh, there we go. It was at the Middlesex Hospital Medical School on this site that the hormone aldosterone, essential for life, was first discovered in 1952 by James F. Tate, Sylvia A. Simpson and Hilary M. Grundy, the Society for Endocrinology. Well, there you go. Well, see, all these life-changing discoveries and all the rest of it happening on back streets that you would need to know about. Now, as that mentioned, that green plaque, that was part of the Middlesex Hospital, which is now gone. And this building was created as a result of a donation by an anonymous donor for the residents, or for the people who worked at the hospital. And basically, you know, for all the nurses and the doctors. And it was created for that. It wasn't until many years later they discovered that it was actually the very rich person, John Astor, that had put up the money for it to be built. And now you've got a different hospital nearby. A lot of the residents still working in the hospital, but also part of the conditions of this building being sold off in the 1990s was that it had to have a community centre for the locals. So this is it, the Fitzrovia Community Centre. And I suppose that just keeps, you know, local sort of traditions, a bit of help for the elderly, sort of place for the young kids to go, all that side of stuff. And by all accounts, there are tunnels underneath here, up to where the hospital used to be, because that's how the nurses and doctors used to get to work sometimes, you know, sort of away from having to walk through traffic and all the rest of it. Right. There's something about these gimbals. They do have a mind of their own from time to time. They just go off on a wander. So I just thought I'd spin it round to put it back in place. Right. So, I just thought I'd show you this church. Now, I'm not going to go in because it's a Sunday, it's a working day. But I do have some pictures I've taken from when I was in before. But I have to say, the first time I saw it, I just absolutely loved it. You know, you got the houses, and it's almost like a church is growing out of the houses. Oh, great, we've got an alarm going off just as I'm talking. Brilliant. But yeah, it's like, you know, it's like sort of been dropped in between a load of houses. It's like the monsters. And there is a nice little sort of artistic flourish up outside, but I'll put that in the photographs. Now, so this is Ogle Street. We're going to continue on down Foley Street. And one of the things I love about this area is the different styles of the houses. You know, they're all sort of different architectural flourishes. And I have to say, if I was going to live up London, I would cheerfully live here. I know you've got Oxford Street less than 5 minutes away, but this has got a very quaint, almost like sort of urban village feel to it. You know, it's got lots of little cafes and pubs. And like I say, lovely design places to live in. Just very stylish. And obviously very rich these days, as I'm sure it was when it was first created. But I do like it. And there's another artist up there, Henry Fuselli, 1741 to 1825, and he lived there in 1788 to 1803. And I'm mentioning him because he was a one-time lover of someone that we mentioned in the first Fitzrovia video, Mary Wollstonecraft. He was her partner for a while, then I believe dumped her.
Hello, mate.
All right. Now, this here is obviously a public toilet, or is it? This is now called the Attendant. It's a coffee place, and I have said in the past, you know, coffee is pretty much coffee. And for me, like, you know, there's a few of them that stick out, but for the most part, I think a lot of them taste pretty much the same, with the exception of this one and a few others. But this one was one of the best coffees I've ever had. And you go down inside, it is very touristy, it is usually very full, because there's only about a dozen seats in the whole place, because it was an inside toilet, and they've actually kept some of the features from the urinals and everything down there. So yeah, you can go down there, you can have a seat if you're willing to wait, or if you're looking there's a space, or you can take one away. But the coffee is lovely, I have to say. I was really impressed with it. Now, almost done for this tour. I'm just going to take you up here and show you a very fine designed building, in my opinion. Now, you'll often hear me gripe when I'm doing my walks, and I do rant a bit about architecture today and the steel and glass and the blandness of it all, and it just does, you know, downright depresses me, because sometimes you'll see a building like this. Now, this is now a hotel, one of the Langhams, but it was previously a home for nurses. And the design with the tiles and everything was apparently so it could be cleaned easy, you know, in the sort of the grime of London at the time. But, you know, look at all the design flourishes that have gone into it. And it just makes it stand out a mile. Absolutely beautiful. And this was a nurse's home. Like, you know, wasn't, you know, for rich people. But some thought went into it and some character. And, as I say, today we seem obsessed with steel and glass and blandness, at least for my side of things. So that's where we're going to finish today. Hold on, let me just come back down a bit, bring it around. Okay, so that's the end of Fitzrovia Part 2. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope it was good for you. I'm going to do a Part 3. I think that will probably cover Fitzrovia. But let me know what you think, if you have any comments, or if you want to know anything more about some of the places mentioned. And hopefully there should be some things appearing outside of me now, so that you can link to another video if you so wish. Okay, but otherwise, thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next time. All right, bye.